No Remzo?
Remzo is still not feeling great.
Yeah. Let's see.
God
It's
bless
COVID,
him.
man. It's COVID.
Which is why I'm convinced I had it when it first started, because
Likewise, but
Well, can't you be tested, Jimmy?
no, the antibody tests in the beginning weren't that accurate.
right.
But can't they test you now to see if you've ever had the antibodies in your
No,
bloodstream?
I mean, some people it goes away. The antibodies go away.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to be in fine fettle now.
That's a great word.
It is.
Ready?
Yes.
Let me make sure.
I asked Ben Boychuk, of whom is that a bust over your right shoulder?
That's just it's a phrenology head.
Are you a phrenologist, sir?
No, but it's very funny.
And on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the world according to, of course, America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We are joined tonight by managing editor of American Greatness, Ben the Rock Boychuk.
Great to be here. I'm live and I'm not a cat.
And
I don't get that. Explain that.
There's a video going around today of a hearing on the internet where one of the lawyers accidentally applied a cat filter to his Zoom chat, and he's embarrassingly trying to get the judge to continue with the hearing as his assistant is desperately trying to undo this cat filter. It's
It's
funny
very
as
funny.
hell.
It's very funny. What
Yeah.
may I ask what is a cat filter?
It superimposes a cat over a person's face, and so you see this poor bastard, his eyes are moving back and forth behind this face of a cat. It's the greatest thing ever. Everybody needs to look it up.
And of
Okay, God bless you,
course,
sir.
we will look it up. And of course, thank you for that, Ben. And of course, let's welcome back to the show, Rob Kendall from 93.1 FM WIBC. Bam! The future of conservative talk radio. Welcome back, Rob.
God, what an intro. And Ben's hair looks great.
Yes.
God
But
bless you, sir. God bless
Of
you,
course,
sir.
the show wouldn't be complete without Ben's amazing haircut and author, lover, husband, saint, sinner, father, grandfather, former shoe salesman, and of course, economic guru extraordinaire, America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We welcome you all. We welcome you all. We welcome you, sir. And we welcome everybody that's listening to us on our YouTube channel, The World According to Ben Stein. You could also find us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. And we'll soon have all our episodes up on our iTunes podcast. And of course, Stitcher and all those other places. But let's get to it right away. My mother calls me up today and she says, "Are you watching this?" And I said, "Watching what?" And she goes, "The impeachment hearings." And I was like, and she was making a note of Trump's lawyer because he's of the same faith and he's an observant Jew. And when he was drinking water, he was covering his hand like it was his head like it was a yarmulke. And I said, "No, I am not watching this sham." And I refuse to acknowledge it. I refuse to watch it. I'm actually happy that I'm not happy with the Republican senators that voted for it, but I am happy that Kamala Harris, it wasn't tied at 50-50 and she got her first vote in. So that's my one happy moment of all of this. But we are living through sham times, Ben, perpetrated for the last 5 years by the media. We have been inundated with absolute shams, Ben, and it's frightening.
Absolute disgraceful shams. These are Stalinesque and Stalinist show trials. This is a Stalin show trial. A, shouldn't be happening at all because Mr. Trump is no longer president. B, there is no evidence that he committed a crime and at all. And in fact, I seem to be the only person in America who actually took the time to read the speech that he gave to his crowd at the Ellipse. There's not a word in there about acting anything other than peacefully. And he urges, in fact, insists that his followers and friends act peacefully. So this is just a pure act of vengeance and political fraud, but put on by some very nasty, angry people. And it is extremely frightening to me that these people now are running the country and are control the levers of power. And to me, the joke is, it's a rather grim joke, the joke is if was an insurrection and a coup, it was done by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and their ilk, not at all by those demonstrators who clearly should not have been there. No doubt about that. But the coup has taken place by the media and the Nancy Pelosi's of this world.
Ben Boychuk, you actually were extremely, let's just say you had a lot of words to say about this.
Well, sort of. It's funny, Judah, you and I have unified with the president of the United States. Well, so-called. We've unified with Joe Biden in not watching this trial. I don't know if you saw Circle Back Jen today said that the president or Biden is not paying attention to the trial. He's kind of hoping that the Senate will be able to chew gum and walk at the same time and, pass a what is it? 1.7 trillion dollars now?
1.9 trillion.
1.9. Like I think by tomorrow morning it'll be 2.1, Ben.
Trillion here, trillion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Is it even real money at this point? Is it just play money?
That's
now?
a very good point. Is any of it real, sir?
Right. It's just whatever. It just depends on what we're willing to believe, I guess. But so no, I'm not watching the thing. I had only heard this afternoon that Donald Trump's lawyer may not be very good. Maybe the cat lawyer would be a little bit better for him. I heard that the defense, the opening statement of the defense didn't go super duper well. But in terms of shams, yeah, this is the latest, greatest travesty of a sham that we're seeing right now, to the extent that anyone's paying attention. I think it will be to the lasting shame of the 6 Republicans who voted that, yes, this is a constitutional exercise. It's just not. It just simply isn't. And I can understand why someone like Mitt Romney would have voted that way. But the others, shame on them. This thing is so plainly unconstitutional. And just to underscore what you said a moment ago, Ben Stein, the idea that you can have a trial to remove a former president from the office where he no longer sits is apart from being unconstitutional, just from the plain text of the Constitution, it's illogical.
Well, it's wildly dishonest too. I mean, again, I'm old, so I go back to I wasn't viewing a Stalinist show trials. They weren't televised, but this is a Stalinist show trial. These are simply invented charges by prosecutors who are really just political hatchet men, and I guess in some cases hatchet women. And it is an embarrassment to the United States of America. I have a very, very close friend, extremely close friend, who's from a foreign country, and the other day she said to me, this is horrible, this is happening, and then she added, in the United States of America.
What about you, Rob? What are you saying, or what are your callers saying?
So we talked about this today. It's fascinating, right? These people, being the Democrats, can't solve any real problems. And when you can't solve real problems, you have to invent non-existent problems to keep people perpetually in fear so that they don't pay attention, that you're not solving any real problems. And this is what this impeachment is all about. It's what the Marjorie Greene stuff was about last week. It's like when we were kids, there was the follow the bouncing ball on the Disney songs, and you would follow the Mickey logo as it would go along with the song. And that's exactly what this is. The other thing that's fascinating is in 1998, Republicans had Bill Clinton lying under oath on camera, right? Literally the the definition of obstruction of justice. And voters still punished the Republicans for that impeachment trial in 1998 because they said, it's like Animal House. They can't do that to our pledges. Only we can do that to our pledges. They said, you can't do that to Clinton. Only we can do that to Clinton. And yet Democrats don't seem to fear that at all. They don't care about that at all. They need to keep people in perpetual fear, and this is the next step.
Well, there's nothing holding them back now. There's nothing holding them back now. We are just a thin paper from being a dictatorship. And I had the most extraordinarily horrible thought 2 days ago. A close friend and I, well, one of my nurses, because as I've told you a million times here, I hurt my knee quite badly. And I were driving along Sunset Boulevard here in Beverly Hills, a very, very nice neighborhood, way nicer than I deserve. And there were 3 Beverly Hills cop cars with lights flashing. just a few blocks from where my wife and I live. And I said to my nurse, I bet this is someone who stopped to say something nice about Trump, and so they arrested him. And then I realized it wasn't funny.
Well, you're right. It's not funny. It's actually frightening. And which is the point that I raised to you. Are we living? And Ben, you're more of a historian than I am. Obviously,
I'm a lot older than you.
But you've read way more about history. Do you feel sometimes that this is one of the only times in history where we're actually living through it, realizing how nuts it is? Usually you have to look back on history. We're living in history. And I don't think it's just Trump supporters or Republicans. I think there are a lot of scared to death people out there that are being run a driven narrative by 15% of our culture.
Well, we are seeing a situation very similar to the outbreak of the Civil War, which really should more properly be called the war between the states. And second, we are seeing something very, very much like the torture of my late friend Richard Nixon. There was some horribleness going on, and people would not stop it. The Civil War was about an enormous moral issue. This is just a way for the Democrats to acquire, accumulate more power over people like the four of us in this room, and it's not constitutional. It's not honest. It's indecent. It is actually indecent. It is as indecent as if they put on a pornography show in the well of the House of Representatives or the Senate.
Ben Boychuk.
Ben Stein, I actually want to maybe elaborate on this a little bit. And I was wondering, since you lived through Watergate and you lived through the Vietnam era, and there were a lot of people at that time who, it was not uncommon to refer to Richard Nixon as King Richard, right? And there was a narrative in the liberal media from the New York Times and the Washington Post and elsewhere that that Nixon posed a particular threat to the Constitution. And as it turns out, that wasn't really true. And I wonder if this, in a way, is kind of what we're seeing with Trump now in this second impeachment trial is kind of a wish fulfillment on the part of people who didn't get their satisfaction with Richard Nixon almost 50 years ago.
Karl Marx said that history repeats itself. First time as tragedy, second time as farce. Nixon's situation was tragedy. There's a building, the monument to the Holocaust in Cambodia, that is a several stories high building entirely made of human skulls, created by the mass murders done by the communists, all made possible by getting rid of Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger from the White House so that they could not stop the Khmer Rouge from doing these incredible atrocities that are simply beyond belief. This time, thank God, there's no Khmer Rouge operating, but there's a lot of mischief out there in the world. And it seems to me we are now going hand in hand to the Iranians and asking them to begging their pardon for having said bad things about them in the Trump era. And we are heading towards another time when the tyrants and the mass murderers will be forgiven and welcomed into the fold of world diplomacy and world democracy and world violence.
Well, they are right now. You brought up something about the Khmer Rouge, right? I mean, let's look at China right now with this virus that they unleashed on the world. I mean, and to still be accepted, and Joe Biden we know is going to capitulate to the Chinese government, Rob. I mean, that is the Khmer Rouge, and I mean,
there's only one syllable in that word. I mean, there's only one vowel in that word. There's sir, it's not really a question of capitulating to them. I mean, we're not really in any kind of contest with them right now, but it is just a sign that this administration is weak when it comes to taking on people who are doing evil things. And I'm also old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan, a genuinely great man, called the Soviet Union the evil empire. And this is I have a terrible feeling that the people in the Biden administration are moving towards recognition of Iran as a dominant player in the Middle East, and that will be a really, really evil empire.
Okay, before we go to break, Michael Horowitz has a question for you, Ben. It was Kissinger against Nixon resupplying Israel during the Yom Kippur War.
That is a lie which has been circulating over and over and over again. He was at first, as I understand it, of course, it's, Mr. Kissinger has not shared any conferences with me, but Mr. Nixon did. Kissinger was against giving Israel arms for them to have a preemptive strike against Egypt. There was data from satellite observation that showed that Egypt was building up, Syria was building up for an invasion of Israel. Mr. Kissinger and the man who was Secretary of Defense at the time, his name escapes me. I think it might have been Mel Laird, but I'm sorry, the name escapes me at the moment. Said, "Don't let Israel do not preempt." And Kissinger said to some high-ranking Israeli person, "You will not even get a nail and a hammer if you preempt." Then, when the attack by the Arabs started, and the Soviet-made anti-aircraft rockets were keeping the Israeli Air Force really impotent, then Kissinger joined in with Nixon, whose idea was in the first place to give Israel the devices to jam those rockets and let the Israeli Air Force dominate the skies, which led to the Israeli overwhelming victory. So that was, as far as I know, that's that story.
There you are, Michael Horowitz. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Who else could you have asked that question to? I want to thank everybody for listening to us on YouTube, following us on Facebook, and of course now MeWe, and Ben's newsletter, Ben Stein at Substack.com. We are joined tonight by Rob Kendall, the #1 conservative radio talk show host in the Indianapolis area, 93.1, BAM, the future of conservative talk radio.
What an intro. What an intro.
Hey, well, if you ever need it, let me know, and I will gladly do that. And I am, we've lived through 5 years of reality ceasing to exist on certain levels. And I'm taken back to the Kavanaugh hearings, when something was brought into the vernacular that I still can't grasp, was when everybody said, and this was the kicker to it all, this should have told us what was coming. When somebody says, or when the media says, it's her truth.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, you are so right. You're so right. Exactly right. Exactly right. It's not true, but it's her truth. Exactly right. And that was the Salem witch trials. That whole hearing was the Salem witch trials. It was exactly the crucible made into a TV news show. A really, really scary time in American life. That was just terrifying. And now, of course, we're going to get a Biden court packing if nobody can stop them by legal, constitutional, peaceful means. This situation is really scary, really, really scary. I mean, I am really, really scared. I'm very, very blessed that I'm old and I got to see America in its great days when we still had obedience to the Constitution. Goodbye. That's the past.
But a moment in time where a narrative was written that to make a truth, it's like we've been talking a lot about race on this show. Now, if anybody ever would have watched the Super Bowl the other night, they would have seen a lot of people with a lot of wealth claiming about systemic racism, and again, a narrative that's been created, Rob, that has set in motion the events that we have now.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things, and look, I freely admit I didn't understand the importance of it until the last couple of years, is the quality job that liberals, far left radicals have done in dominating the public education system to the point where they have dumbed people down and indoctrinated people that they don't start thinking for themselves in many cases until they're in their mid-30s. And they have been able to completely encompass such a large swath of people that even when people start thinking for themselves in their mid-30s or later, it takes a long time before they figure out what's going on. And thus you have, like what you have in the Kavanaugh hearing, where there is no punishment for it. I mean, people get rewarded for that behavior, and those sickening displays are accepted and promoted. And it is going to be a long climb to dig out of this hole, because public education has done a phenomenal job at brainwashing young people.
And private education too. I mean, I look back at my alma mater, Columbia, alma mater's Columbia and Yale. It's terrifying when people are talking. I just was sitting having lunch yesterday. I had a really, really cheerful, modest place next to a swimming pool. And I got the Yale Alumni magazine on my phone, and I was looking through it. And they actually had the incredible nerve and mendacity to compare the Trump administration to the Hitler administration in terms of its racism. And I immediately just stopped what I was doing and wrote them a letter saying, "You lying SOBs." But anyway, but imagine that's happening at Yale, which used to require pretty high academic credentials. Not anymore. I beg your pardon for going on so long. I'm terribly sorry.
Judah, can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please.
Time magazine had a very interesting random accidental act of journalism recently, in which they spelled out exactly what happened with this election and this coordinated effort. And what is really scary about all of this is that the court system, the system that is designed to be the break glass in case of emergency part of American justice and everything we're about, enabled just complete bull crap to take place, which allowed massive voting irregularities across the country and conveniently in key areas of key swing states. That should scare the hell out of everyone. That not that the Democrats tried to steal an election or pull bull crap or shenanigans. It's that courts, including and up to the Supreme Court, said that's fine.
Yeah, amazing. Not one court had the balls to get in there and say, at least let's have an investigation. Not one court. They're so frightened by the power of the media and the power of the people who are burning down cities that they dare not speak.
I'm quoting Breitbart right now when I say this. So 32,000 votes separated the Republicans from taking the House. 32,000 votes separated the Republicans from taking the House. So if people aren't aware, what Rob is talking about is it's an openly admitted cabal that got interviewed by Time magazine that Ben Boychuk openly and honestly said, They
didn't steal it, Judah. They fortified it.
They culturally misappropriated it. It was amazing.
That's right. That's the best word. They misappropriated votes.
The evidence of serious questions was overwhelming, gushing out of the earth like a gusher oil well. The courts would not touch it. Courts are not made up of people like Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird, although he was a lawyer, not a judge in that case. But courts are made up of fallible human beings of all kinds, men, women, young, old, black, white, Jew, Gentile, anything. And they can be scared. They can be bulldozed. They're often not particularly smart. I am a lawyer. I've practiced before a number of judges, some of whom were embarrassingly ill-informed. You're so right. It's supposed to be the last line of defense. In fact, it turned out to be pitiful.
And the one that stood out to me was Pennsylvania, because what's crazy about Pennsylvania is their state legislature was saying, wait a second, we make the laws and we didn't make these laws. It's not like there was some far left legislature in cahoots with the governor and secretary of state. You had an actual legislature saying, no. And the judges in Pennsylvania, and then with John Roberts, just went, that's fine, whatever.
Well, John Roberts, he really should not have ever been appointed. I would love to have known how they got to him. Candy ass is the word that comes to mind.
Larry Klayman will know, and because he's definitely got his opinion on how they get to judge it. But Ben Boychuk, sorry for interrupting you.
Oh no, that's quite all right. No, was it last week or this week that the Supreme Court was supposed to hear arguments on one of the rump state lawsuits. Unfortunately, I don't have it at my fingertips, but it's almost like a little bit too little too late. But more than anything else, it's almost as if the Constitution has become what the framers feared, which is a kind of parchment barrier to the tyrannical impulses of a faction, and in this case, a kind of a ruling class faction or a permanent bureaucracy faction, a permanent government faction, and so it's difficult, because on the one hand, we as people who are on the right wing of the political spectrum in this country have been taught to and grown up kind of revering and venerating the Constitution. But what happens when it's essentially ignored, or worse, government uses the language of the Constitution, or the idea of the Constitution, or sort of nods their heads toward the Constitution at complete opposite purposes of why the thing was ratified in the first place. And so where we find ourselves in is under circumstances where it really isn't we the people. It's really it's the permanent bureaucracy. It's the ruling class, the bipartisan ruling class that Angelo Codevilla writes about so beautifully.
It's a ruling class, but it's a new class. There's a very famous Czech, not Czech, Yugoslav writer named Milovan Djilas, wrote a very, very important book called Conversations with Stalin. Ben is nodding his head, he obviously knows the book. And then he wrote another book, or else he contributed to another book called The New Class. And that was a class of party officials and bureaucrats in Soviet-controlled countries, although Yugoslavia turned out to be not one of those countries after a while. That's what we have now. We have a new ruling class. When I was a young man, my father was very closely connected with a group called the Committee for Economic Development. And my father was research director for them. It was composed largely of big industrial and labor union titans. And they were a Washington establishment and a United States establishment. We now have a new establishment. It's kids. It's kids who made billions in the internet, kids who made billions in various stock market treats and games. Kids who made billions somehow, some way, without having any experience of real life except making money as fast as they can print it. They're the new ruling class. They know nothing about the Constitution, nothing about history, nothing. I beg on my knees, all of you who are watching, to get from your, wherever you get DVDs from, a wonderful multi-volume DVD called The World at War, which goes into great detail about how Hitler took Germany from being one of the most advanced democracies in Europe into being an absolute airtight dictatorship by slow, easy steps, and suddenly then wham, just in one night, it was all gone. So little by little, and then it was all gone.
Hey, Judah,
happening here right now, right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, Rob.
Judah, can I piggyback off that? Ben makes a great point.
Don't ask, Rob. It's your world. No, it's Ben's world, but it's, you are.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the fascinating things, I was watching a long documentary of Mussolini the other night, and what's really scary about Mussolini is people don't realize he started out as a Democrat socialist. What Mussolini realized is that many people in Italy at the time saw through Democrat socialism, kind of like people saw through Democrat socialism here in America. They rejected it. And so the fascist and the fascism, which is what Antifa is, I mean, the stuff that Antifa is doing is literally the stuff that the fascists in Italy were doing in the 20s and 30s, was the way to get total government control of everything. The cycle between Italy in the 20s and 30s and America now they're running parallel to each other in many ways. It's incredibly
very, very, very frightening. And I could just, we don't need to have a Mussolini marching with his black shirts from northern Italy to Rome. We've already got them in Washington. The ruling class, they don't give a damn. I have a very close, lovely, tall friend. She keeps saying, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? Nobody's going to stop them. Nobody's going to stop them. I don't see how we're going to stop them. We've had as I said before, there was no coup by those jackasses who broke into the Capitol. There was a coup by Nancy Pelosi and the people who run the news media. That's the coup, and it worked.
And if you're asking in the chat room, sorry, Ben Boychuk, if you're asking in the chat room what we're referring to as the cabal, in this case, the cabal was a bunch of American, Ben, what would you call them? Editors, media people, people of
Media
all
titans.
levels that knew how to, what was the word? Appropriate. Ben Boychuk, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the word they used in the Time magazine story was fortify
Fortify,
the
yes.
election, but it was really to appropriate the vote. Yeah, I think that's about right. Ben Stein, I wanted to add something to what you said a moment ago about the new class. It's not just the youngsters in Silicon Valley. We also have a gerontocracy, and I say this with all due respect to you, with all due respect to my elders, sir. But we're being ruled by people like Nancy Pelosi, who's 80 years old, Joe Biden, who's 78 years old. How in the hell old is Anthony Fauci? 82, I think. These are people who should have, under any normal circumstances in corporate America, retired years ago. And yet they're continuing to make policy and rules and laws that will govern certain generations that they have no understanding of the implications beyond feathering their own nests.
Well, but they understand the power. They're old, but that doesn't keep them from wanting to be powerful and rich. And I assure you, as an old person, the good things of life still have a lot of appeal to me. Sorry?
Not old, rode hard.
Yeah, very good.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody in the comments section, and I want to thank everybody that's listening and watching tonight, and will be listening and watching later on. You can find us on Facebook, and of course, subscribe to Ben Stein at Substack.com. I was just told that WeMe is a Democrat company. We can't use it. I don't know what companies we can use anymore. But of course, we're joined tonight by Rob Kandal, the #1 radio conservative talk show host in the Indianapolis metro area. Amazing. And of course, managing editor of American Greatness, Ben Boychuk. But there's something that I thought of today that actually as they supposedly that they made this video, right, of a non-accurate video of Trump's words and people storming the Capitol. And this thing that we've been hearing quite often is all these congressmen and senators that were really scared for their lives. I would love if they made a video for the last year of people that live in cities where Antifa has been doing riots and where Black Lives Matter have been terrorizing people, and showing videos of people really being terrorized with no Washington police, no military behind them. And I'm sick of this narrative that people were scared. You know what? We Americans have been scared for the last year of COVID, of everything else, and we have got no reassurances from these asshats that run this country. And it's and Ben, again, the narrative. Well, we couldn't even make a commercial for TV of showing real fear of what American citizens have been going through the last year.
Oh, it's not. Oh, my dear friend and traveling companion, Judah. I'm afraid what we've seen is just nothing compared to what's coming. I mean, what is there to stop the Senate from impeaching? Well, it says it's not going to impeach Trump, but now I'm reading that he's going to be criminally indicted for inciting the riot, and he's going to go to prison. If that happens, we really might as well start hanging up the swastikas up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, because at that point, America ceases to exist and becomes Nazi America. And by the way, to go to a point made by the two gentlemen below me on the screen, the word Nazi is because it's called the National German Workers' Socialist Party. Socialist. That was what it's supposed to be. And socialism is not a group of happy Danish children playing and eating delicious, incredibly good ham, which they make in Denmark. It is about seizing power. It's about taking power and taking control of one's life away from one.
I know, but more to the point, and I'll go to Ben and Rob on this one too, is it's like we see the obvious in front of us of what I just said, of people, you know, Ben, your wife and nurse having to hide in the bathroom with a gun as BLM and Antifa were outside your house.
Shouting,
So,
eat the rich. Shouting,
so
eat the rich.
screaming, "Eat the rich!" A 73-year-old woman and her and her amazing nurse in a bathroom. People living in sheer terror, Rob, and nobody gives a crap about them because I guess
Because the
we're
people
privileged.
besieging them were black.
Yeah.
And because they're leftists, no, they got to pass. They got to pass. My wonderful neighborhood here in Beverly Hills, which was turned into a war zone for briefly, to be sure, it's perfectly nice now. And nobody cared about it. Nobody noticed it. Nobody noticed that it was a left-wing coup. Nobody notices that. You're not allowed to notice that. The media won't allow you to tell the truth. There's no truth anymore. We said that earlier in the show. There is no truth anymore. Truth is nothing.
Yeah, so I went to work the day after downtown Indianapolis was completely destroyed. And I will tell you that drive in that day was, I used to talk radio in North Carolina, so I got pretty experienced with hurricanes. It looked like a hurricane had come through a downtown major metropolitan city. I sat in my suburban home and watched the night before as the Bank of Indianapolis, a literal bank, was taken out. Our building has double pane bulletproof glass, and they kept throwing bricks at it, trying to get into the radio station on the circle downtown. I watched it happen in real time, and it happened because the idiot Democrat mayor, the police had it all under control, and it was the deputy mayor, nobody knows where the actual mayor was, said to the IMPD, the Indianapolis Police Department, let them march. They let it happen. It's indisputable. And then the next night, the police, IMPD, knew it was going to happen again. They knew when they were coming. They knew where they were coming. And nobody did anything again at the end of May, 1st of June. 2 nights in a row, people died. No one said a damn word about that. And that is disgusting.
It is disgusting. I would say again to anyone who cares to listen, North Idaho. I know that some people on this screen with me do not want me mentioning it, but North Idaho is the future, I think, for people who want to have safe, secure lives.
Ben Boychuk.
All right. Well, look, it's a frigid wasteland occupied by rabid skunks and deadly moose. But yes, but yeah, think about moving there. I would like to actually, no, in all seriousness, move to red states. Sane people move to red states, hunker down, organize, rebuild, figure it out. Because because the one thing that and Indiana is, see, the problem with that, though, as we know, Idaho is a very good example of this. Idaho is essentially a red state with a big blue island called Boise. And I believe that's true in your fine state, Rob.
Well, our governors are pretend Republican. He's an idiot too, so sometimes you count on them.
Yeah, that's the trouble. We've got a Republican problem, but we've also got an organization problem. And this is kind of one of the points that I wanted to make tonight that Judah was very happy to let me make, and I'll try to make it quickly, is this. Politics is not a spectator sport. And one of the problems that we on the right have had is that we have, well, among other things, we have jobs and families, and proper political organization and activism takes a lot of time and energy. So if you really want to make a difference, you actually do have to get involved with local politics. You have to know what your school board's doing. You have to know what your city council's doing. You have to know what some of these obscure state boards, I live in California, a lot of these obscure so-called nonpartisan boards, water boards, for example, have incredible power and deal with a lot of money. And believe you me, they're not nonpartisan, because those are the places where in states like California, the Democrats build their bench to run for higher office, to run for state legislature, to run for state senate, to eventually run for treasurer, governor, lieutenant governor, what have you. And so that's something that conservatives and Republicans have kind of neglected to our great, great detriment. So remember that, if you really want to fix some of this stuff. And so you have to get off of 4chan and Reddit and ignore some of this stuff. I think the greatest damage that's been done in the past 4.5 years has been, it's small, but it's virulent. And that's this QAnon business. And what's the problem with this QAnon business? Well, the funny thing is we have all these polls showing that Democrats know more about QAnon than Republicans do. But QAnon has really taught people to treat politics as something to sit back, watch, trust the plan. There's no plan to trust, my friends. Make the plan. Execute the plan. Don't wait for somebody else to come do it for you. There's no plan. You're the plan. It says we the people on the Constitution, by God. It's us. And so don't sit back and wait for somebody else to do what we've got to do. So that's my little rant. I agree with you, Ben Stein. Move someplace nice in a red state that may or may not be in the northern part of Idaho, but move and get organized there. And, with like-minded people who actually, want to save the country. And then maybe we can get something done. Maybe. Can't. His audio's muted, Judah.
Hey,
go ahead, Rob.
Well, Ben, I was just going to ask you, because you touched on a great point about. Oh, I think his mic's back on. Okay, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say we came awfully close to continuing the Trump revolution or standing in the way of the freight train of history and yelling stop. We came awfully close to it this time, but we were stopped dead by extremely questionable behavior. See, I'm afraid to even say cheating. I'm afraid I do not want the police bursting into my house in the middle of the night, carrying me away in chains. So I'll just say by questionable behavior, which I'm sure was perfectly all right, but questionable. So we came very, very close. So it's not a hopeless situation at all. And when I hear people talking, what I hear them saying is, we voted for who? We voted for Biden. What the hell has he done?
Yeah.
See, but here's the biggest problem to what you just brought up. They have, we used to say they have the media, and we've been saying it, and that's the God's honest truth. Now they've actually shut down our forms of media, and we don't know what forms of media they're going to shut down next. I find the most ironic thing that Carolyn Maloney is going after Parler for inciting the riots and for inciting stuff. And Carolyn Maloney was the original with the vote count in where was it, Staten Island, whatever part of New York she was in, where where Trump was saying they should redo the Carolyn Maloney vote. That they're going after Parler right now. That they're going after who knows what news organization we have left next is a frightening thought. I mean, Ben Boychuk, they could go easily after American greatness.
Sure.
I hope and pray they don't go against the American Spectator.
Well, they can go after anybody they want if they perceive them as a threat. And they certainly perceive Fox News and One American News as threats, and Newsmax News as threats. Parler certainly grew way too fast for people's liking, and they've been hobbled. I keep hearing rumors about Parler, but who knows if they're ever going to be back the way they were. Gab, maybe. I really believe that, we have to recall there was a time in this country when we didn't have social media and we were actually able to communicate, organize. It's something that we may have to recover certain old ways of doing things. Look into Eastern European samizdat.
Yeah. Like you did when you had a pickup football game when you were a kid, and you'd call one friend who'd call the next friend who'd call the next friend who'd call the next friend. And
may I respectfully say we're really not. I don't think we're if we just keep at it, we're in a scary, very scary situation. But we came awfully close this time. If we had just one judge in Pennsylvania or in Michigan who had any guts at all, the whole thing would have turned out, I think, quite differently.
Ben,
So we came awfully close. If those imbeciles had not rioted and caused problems at the Capitol, that would have been a big help. By the way, I see that there are all these allegations that the rioters were carrying guns. Even one that said they were carrying machine guns, rockets, flamethrowers, knives, bayonets. I haven't seen one video, not one picture anywhere of a protester carrying any weapons.
They were carrying selfie sticks.
Ben, it's
They were
their
carrying
truth.
selfie sticks
Ben,
and
it's
not
their
even
truth.
baseball bats.
Ben, it's
I mean, that's
truth.
just a dead lie about them being marching in well armed to attack the Capitol. And by the way, what if they had seized the Capitol for a day? The seat of government is not an empty building. The seat of government is where the elected representatives go and legitimately meet. It's not an empty building.
But Ben, what you bring up is an interesting point, and I'll get to Rob because he does this on talk radio every day. You're right. We came this close, but what they are doing right now is making sure we can't stay that close, and that is the goal of what they are doing right now by shutting down, hoping to shut down Parler full time, by suspending Trump permanently on Twitter. They're taking away our communications, where somebody in the chat room said they're making us go Amish. And and Rob Kendall, I mean, what are your callers saying? Are they frightened about this?
Yeah, so it's fascinating because our numbers, I mean, we're number one in a major metropolitan city. Our numbers are numero uno. I'd like to take some credit for that, not all of it, but all of our shows are doing very well. And the problem is, though, there's only so many people that listen to talk radio, right? And that used to be the great equalizer. You go back to the 90s, even the early 2000s, obviously the Rush Revolution, then other people started popping up that have carried that on. But you're right. I mean, a huge portion of the message is getting choked off out there. And look, they'll come for us next. I mean, they're going to get the FCC eventually, and although I'm kind of excited to have to interview a liberal and make them talk every day. Maybe that'll be great. I don't know. But that it is a gigantic problem that you are literally having voices squelched. I mean, think about it. The Ayatollah of Iran has a Twitter account, and Donald Trump does not.
It's astounding. It's astounding the lies that the major media say day after day. Every morning, as I've said on this show before, every morning as I walk through the kitchen to get my egg, I see put out on the table the day's newspapers, the LA Times, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Always media lies in front of me. Always, 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 always. Go inside, turn on the computer. Always media lies, unless it's Fox News. It's all media lies.
I hate to say
lie.
I hate to disagree with. I mean, I hate to disagree with you on this. It's Fox now too. Okay, you had Guy Benson, that idiot. That's what do you call it on Fox News, is saying it was so disturbing watching the video that moron put together. The anti-Trump, he goes, it was so, they've gotten to Fox. You're right. They have 3 hours at night on Fox, but for the better part of the majority of the day, Fox has become, at best, a moderate news station. And you know what I say, a moderate now is a Republican in the closet, Ben Boychuk. And, and they just fired, obviously, Lou Dobbs, a great voice of the people. I mean, who doesn't like Lou Dobbs? I mean, Lou Dobbs is one of those guys that, like, his hair color has gotten lighter as the years have gone on, and his voice has gotten stronger. And even Fox is getting rid of them, Ben. You see
and Judah, I totally agree with you. And we talked about Lou Dobbs the other day on the air, that Lou Dobbs was one of the people that really got me interested in politics in my late teens and early 20s, because he wasn't as magnanimous or as entertaining as Trump, but he said all the stuff that Trump said now a decade ahead of time. I mean, the idea of the American worker, the idea of a robust policy of foreign policy through strength and border security, and these issues that no other conservatives were harping on, it kind of became the blueprint for Trump.
I agree. That tells us that we can get a program going, a political program that will captivate and capture the voter. We have to stick to our knitting, keep doing what we're doing. Obviously, never violently. Of course, you can be as violent as you want if you're on the left, or if you're not white, you can be as violent as you want. But we have to be very nonviolent at all times and mind our P's and Q's, and little by little, we will get enough people so that even the people who possibly one chance in a million might have stolen the election will have to admit that we won the election. And
somebody asked in the chat, can Germany happen here? And I say, Ben, yes, I say it can absolutely happen here.
There's a famous book by, I think it's by Sinclair Lewis, called It Can Happen Here. It's an incredibly scary book. I recommend it very highly.
And I think we're a hop, skip, and a jump from the danger zone.
We're already in sir. We're already in the danger zone. I assure you. When in my neighborhood, Beverly Hills, a really, really, really nice neighborhood that I don't deserve to live in a million years, the police are cruising up and down the street looking for protesters. We're in a very bad situation.
The trouble with Lewis, the Lewis book, Ben Stein, is that Lewis was a bit of a socialist, as you may recall, and that
I very much so.
Well, okay, and he was imagining. He was imagining a right-wing dictatorship.
I know that, but he made a very good point that it can happen here.
By the way, Ben, for the record, Ben Boychuk, almost all the people that have written brilliant stuff.
Oh yeah, all on the left.
Huxley,
Orwell.
Right. And take John Carpenter, who has written some of the, two of the most dystopian movies of, Escape from New York and Escape from LA, and They Live.
And They Live, one of my favorites of all time. And that movie he called a documentary.
That's exactly right. Is a lefty, so it's.
Who are we talking about now, Judah?
John, we're talking about film director John Carpenter, who wrote Escape from New York, Escape from LA, who's a leftist, but who is, amazingly enough, was writing about what would happen here. Rob, I see you wanted to jump in.
No, I've been watching this documentary on Netflix. It's called The Staircase. And it's about a guy named Michael Peterson, who was an author who was convicted of murder in North Carolina in 2003. And I was actually doing talk radio down there when this happened in 2010. It turns out that the state investigators, the guy was just completely corrupt that put this dude in jail, and a large amount of people were freed because this one guy was involved in all of these cases. And I don't know whether this guy did it or didn't, but the fact was he got completely railroaded by the judicial system and spent 8 years in prison because of this. And it's the same thing now we're seeing in the political system, which is people and their votes and the sanctity of our elections are getting completely railroaded by these judges, by these court systems. And it scares the hell out of me, man.
We're all scared, but we have to persevere. My sister who told me she's become very obsessed with the racism in America today. Obviously, I have a very different take on what the truth of the situation is. But I said to her, honey, in the mid-'60s, when I was demonstrating for civil rights and getting beat and hit by the police in my wonderful native state of Maryland, which I love so much, where were you? And I think the question we're going to be our children, our grandchildren will be asking us in 2021, where were you?
So Ben, I have a very scary question for you right now, because you got the COVID vaccine, right?
I hope to get more of it in about 3 days. Yes.
In 3 days. So here's my biggest fear, and I ask all of you this, and I ask everybody in the audience that's listening to this question, is once you get the vaccine, shouldn't you not have to wear a mask?
Of course.
Yeah, that's not what Fauci says.
That's not right. But that's not what anybody says. You can't.
Yeah.
you can't have like a little rope that, like, you went to a concert and or you went to like a music festival where they put a band on your hand that says vaccinated, and they wouldn't let you not walk around without a mask. Yet you've been vaccinated. I don't understand. Oh, I do understand it's control. Ben, do you think this is ever going to end?
I think it will eventually end, but I think the idea of covering up people's faces and the parts of their faces where they express themselves and you can see who they really are is very, very deeply psychologically troubling. They're turning us into machines, automatons, taking away our personalities, making us into zombies. In fact, a zombie which can take a can of soup off the shelf at the grocery store and pay for it with a plastic card. That's not a real person. There's no interaction. There's no social gathering or meeting place, at least in my part of the world. That's not a social setting. You know where's the only place that's open and you can walk around and talk to people freely? Tiffany. If you can't afford to go to Tiffany, you've got no place to go.
So Tiffany Jewelers, that's the solution. And but Ben, they say it kills 96. It gives you a 97% success rate of not getting COVID. That's like 2.5%, 2.99% lower than Dial soap saying this kills all germs. At what point do they say to people, 15,000 people a week should not be having to wear a mask? And
absolutely. Give us back the freedom to express who we are by our faces that God gave us. Our faces that God gave us.
Rob, is it like this in Indianapolis?
Oh, it's horrific. My favorite thing, because look, again, we talk about this red and blue stuff, but the governor here, the governor single-handedly, a phony Republican, Eric Holcomb, single-handedly put over 1 million people out of work. He shut down thousands of businesses. He tried to put people in jail for not wearing a mask. The attorney general at the time, Curtis Hill, stepped in and said, that's unconstitutional. You can't do it. And he pulled the mandate. But here's what they do, okay? So everybody knows about the shot, right? Everybody has an opinion on the shot. The vast majority of the people want the shot. I don't want it yet because I don't think the science is settled on it. And I want to see if Ben grows a third eye or not before I decide I'm going to go forward with it. But the point is, millions of people in this state want this shot. Well, okay, only people 65 and up can get it. That's fine, I understand. But they spent over $100,000 of CARES Act dollars, our money, to run a Super Bowl ad in local markets here telling people to get the shot. They might as well have just taken money, lit it on fire, and kept the homeless people warm downtown because it's been real cold here the past several weeks. It's a joke. These governors, even the Republicans, other than maybe Nome and DeSantis and maybe a couple others, have no idea what they're doing, and they're all weak. It's not
we're weak, and we're being pushed. We're paying for it. We're weak, and we're being pushed around by people who are tough and strong, like Nancy Pelosi. She's tough, and she's pushing us around.
Ben Boychuk?
Well, the obvious solution, my friends, is clear masks.
Is what?
Clear masks.
That's very good. That's very good. Very good. Very good.
I don't know. I have to sadly agree with Rob because really we have a feeble Republican leadership. The people who we expect, with a few exceptions, the people we expect to be right on some of these questions are just weak on a lot of these questions. I've said many times on this program before, people who are regulars in the chat will have heard this before, and certainly Judah and Ben Stein have heard this before. I think we're at the beginning of a realignment, a political realignment in this country. I think you're going to see some very interesting, strange alliances between Trump people and Bernie people on certain questions, not every question. And I think that you're going to see, just as you're seeing people who call themselves never Trumpers gravitate toward the mainstream Democratic Party, I think you're going to see some people on the populist right and the so-called populist left find common ground on certain things. And so alliances that we couldn't have imagined 5, 10, 15 years ago, certainly when I was in college, no, not at all, you'll start to see, because something has got to give. We're a 50-50 country. We cannot remain this way for long. this sort of weird polarization where elections are won or lost by, in certain cases, dozens of votes, and nationally, tens of thousands of votes in a country of 350 million people. It's just not tenable. And so something's going to break. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's going to be pretty or not. It probably won't be. But Americans have always had an allergy to oligarchy. We're not necessarily pure small d Democrats, but we have always had an allergy to oligarchy, going all the way back to John Adams. And so I think that regardless of what happens, Ben Stein, with the Senate, I think that something is going to give, and it's going to give in the next 2 years before this next election. And though it'll be an election, it's going to be a tough one, but we have got to get off of our asses and organize and stop treating politics as something that happens to us. It is not something that happens to us unless we let it happen to us. We have to act.
Absolutely. And I have to go on that note.
I have one question before you run.
Yes.
I'm actually curious about this since we've been bringing it up. We know that the Republican leadership under Nixon was extremely weak.
Extremely.
Is it weaker today than it was then?
It is as weak. It's pretty damn weak. I know you don't like Lindsey Graham. I think he's great. I know he promises to do a lot of things he doesn't then do, but I like what he says. And in the worst days of Watergate, there was hardly anyone who spoke up for President Nixon, and that turned out to be a colossal mistake. So I don't know, but the Republican Party needs to just really lift itself up and start acting like menches.
And on that note, Rob Kendall, we want to thank you for joining us as always from 93.1 BAM, the future of conservative talk. I can never get the call letters, but what are they, Rob?
WIBC.
And of course, we can't not mention American Spectator. It's spectator.org. But Ben Boychuk, who is a managing editor also of American Greatness. We thank you for joining us tonight, Ben. And Ben Stein, of course, America's humble servant. If you would lead us out, sir, in song as you do every week.
How about this song? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight are the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, can you see that star-spangled banner? Okay, what's the next line? So proudly we hail as the well, I can't remember the last floor, so I learned it a very long time ago. But God bless this incredibly great America, and let's all be unbelievably grateful that God let us be here. Good night and good luck.
All. Good night, all. Good night, all. Thank you very much.
Good night, and God bless you, Judah.
Cheers.
God bless you all.